If you've watched Brawlhalla for a while, or even heard of the game, you may know that North America has dominated the Brawlhalla scene since 2018. Even most recently, during the mid-season championship, North America would go on to win doubles and singles. But was that only possible because the top players from Europe couldn't attend? As in, the law prohibited most of the top players in Europe from attending due to visa issues. Some of the players who couldn't attend include Godly, the top player in Europe and arguably the best in the entire world.
He could.
That's it!
If it weren't for
Ladies,
Godly.
it's over! It's over! Godly is the European Summer Champion, and by a long shot, dude. 3-0 in Winners Final, 3-0 in Grand Finals. Godly's too good! He is actually Godly.
And to be honest, it wasn't like Europe was that far off in BCX of 2019, the last actual in-person World Championship. Simple had to take home second place, and it was like no one even cared. North America's great Sandstorm seemed to have yet won another easy Grand Final.
Sandstorm is the world champion!
But it turns out it was much more than simple just getting second place. Europe has an incredible story going on in between each world championship, and from the looks of it, if you did well that year, you were only sealing yourself into a dark fate. But will Europe's most dominant pro yet, Godly, be sealed into the same fate, stuck getting first place all year, then choking on the world stage? Before we answer whether or not Godly will potentially win BCX, I have a question. Have you ever heard of the pro player Dobrain? Because before Godly, Acno, and Simple would battle for first place, there was a race between Dobrain and Dppt for who would be the best in Europe. Dppt was the current best player from Norway and was historically respected for his early skill in the game. Not only would these early players be respected for their talents, but their dedication to Brawlhalla. Advocating for improved player experience, Dppt used his competitive drive to fix any issues he found in the game. And Dobrain shared an equal early passion for the game, being the mastermind behind one of Brawlhalla's iconic combos, the Russian Mafia. Brawlhalla needed Dobrain. It needed an innovator, someone who could bring in new, excited players. His YouTube channel pulled in enormous views early on for the game, detailing the basic combos, providing a baseline tutorial for new players where they needed it. His esports accolades made him a trustworthy source and one the community could look up to. Dobrain would eventually barely pull ahead of Dppt and would be recognized as one of the best one-on-one players in all of Europe, but it probably didn't help him when a complete random took him down at a major tournament. If we look at the information we get on pros today, we get to see many fascinating things, such as earnings, placements, weapon usage, character picks, full-on interviews, and every single one of them uses Twitter. But then there's 2017, and M for Mini, who we have no information on his other placements, and the only information we get is his favorite color is green. Mini was different, and he played a non-conventional style before you could really say there was a conventional way of playing. For example, when you knock out your opponent, you want to cycle weapons or star them of a weapon to gain a slight advantage, but Mini would leave the weapon spawn as bait to punish those who would run for it. Mini would have a total upset over Dobrain, winning in a clear 3-0, and no one could have expected this from a total random. However, this wouldn't be enough to prove that a random can't just have a lucky day. Mini had to prove himself, and he would get to in the Brawlhalla Pro Circuit. The winner of this Pro Circuit match would qualify for the Brawlhalla World Championship to represent as one of Europe's top players. Mini would go on to win the match and head straight to BCX. Unfortunately, the narrative of the story would begin when M for Mini would have a devastating 17th to 24th placement. In addition to his 2017 placement, this would haunt Mini in 2020 where he placed 17th to 24th again, and again he would place 25th at BCX of 2021. M for Mini and Dobrain were still dominant pros after BCX, and soon a very driven third player would join the ranks, named Addy Mestic. Addy Mestic had actually gone second against M for Mini at the BCS Summer Slam, and surprisingly, Addy Mestic would go second during the 2017 Brawlhalla World Championship. Addy Mestic, alongside his duo Cake, were a very popular duo you would hear about, with incredible performances such as winning winter, spring, and summer seasonal championships. And Addy was loved by everyone, especially top North America player Boomy, who was a big fan of Addy and Cake's team. This would make a lot of sense, seeing as how Boomy's North America's best 2v2 player, and they are Europe's best 2v2 team. Addy Mestic would figure out very early on what it takes to get good at Brawlhalla. Not only do you need to have friends to have fun with, and someone to teach you, but you have to have a reason to keep trying. He wanted to be a pioneer of the game, and he wanted to be the player people recognized when thinking of all of Europe. He would eventually succeed in both of these goals. The community would keep Addy going, and in return he would perform his best to see his friends and travel to LANs. After the Brawlhalla World Championship, Addy still had something to prove. He wanted to be undeniably the best in all of Europe, a decision that would sadly lead him down the same path as those on top before him. After the Brawlhalla World Championship, players get a break all the way until the winter, and at the Winter Seasonal Championship of 2018, players of Europe Europe would experience something amazing. Dobrain was not quite ready to give up his spot in the top 3. In addition to competing with Mini, he also had to compete with Addy mestic now. Luckily, Dobrain had always been respected for his innovation of the game, and would be extremely early to the Scythe meta and the character Mordex, who would later on become iconic with the game today. Something people wouldn't expect though, would be up-and-coming player Blue to give Dobrain so much trouble. Dobrain really struggled when new top players would enter the scene. This is likely due to his cerebral nature that deals with understanding his opponent. After defeating Blue, he'd go on to the grand finals where he'd face Addy mestic with his Mordex, which was more than enough to upset him and take the grand finals, winning the Winter Season Championship. Something also worth noting is some of the new names we see in this tournament. There was the mentioned rising player Blue, and a talented hammer main named Simple, who ended up taking 9th place. Unfortunately, this would mark the end of Dobrain's seasonal championship victories, so despite him taking everyone down in Winters, he would not be Europe's top player for that year. Fast forward a few months and it's finally spring. The spring tournament really solidifies the top players for that year. Winter is more or less shaking off the ice. And of course, Emperor Mini would be skyrocketing through his bracket, sending Blue into losers with a 3-0 victory so he could keep moving quickly on to grand finals. And unluckily for Blue, after being thrown out of the winner's side, Addy mestic would take him down as well in losers. He still was not able to quite keep up with them. Clearly, the battle between Emperor Mini and Addy mestic was not over. Addy mestic, much like Emperor Mini, would try out new strategies in his matches. We see some incredibly early usage of weapon throws and attempted combos, a practice Sandstorm would use quite frequently during his dominant North America run. Another experimental weapon throw Addy would try would consist of throwing his weapon up in the air as a distraction to then run at the enemy unarmed. Mini, on the other hand, had a very cyclic playstyle. An attack, reposition, then attack would most likely be adapted from the style given with Lance players. Lance players commonly use the horizontal attacks of Lance to safely throw out moves while keeping distance on the stage. Addy didn't really care for this playstyle, and would instead just run straight towards him. Winning springs wasn't enough for Addy mestic though. For as long as Mini was at the top, Addy would be right there waiting for him in grand finals. As the year advances into the summer of 2018, we see Simple climb a bit higher, finding himself against Mini in losers finals. Nothing much was expected here, as he is also not quite there yet. Red versus Blue, Addy versus Mini. These guys have faced each other multiple times in grand finals, which made these sets very intense. The same thing we would see when Boomy and Sandstorm would face each other. It's like an unspoken rule to go all out the entire set to make it as hype as possible. And this time, things were looking a little too close, and Addy needed to win to be the best in all of Europe. So what did Addy do? He did what always worked. Suit up White Dragon Slayer Val and lock in Twilight Grove. The staging character combo was a staple of Addy's character. In fact, his best performance so far was second place at the Brawlhalla World Championship versus LDZ on Twilight Grove. And Addy mestic would do it. Addy would take down Emperor Mini one final time before the Brawlhalla World Championship. And we can finally say Addy achieved his goal of being the best in all of Europe. It's been another year, there's another top player in Europe. How will he place at the World Championship? 9th place. Instead, a fairly new guy, considered somewhat random, would win this one, and his name would be Sandstorm. Over in America, they only had one big 3 era. There was Sandstorm, Boomy, and Wrenched, but Europe had 2 big 3 eras. First, it was Dobrain, Emperor Mini, and Addy mestic. Then it would turn into Blue, a player named Acno, usually mentioned alongside his teammate Blaze, and the widely regarded most dominant Europe pro ever, Godly. Blue would be the first of these 3, and what made him so different from the original big 3? Players knew Blue would take over soon, because right before BCX, he would have a huge win, taking over the Autumn Seasonal Championship of 2018. And more similar to that of Godly's than the previous top players, he won the reset very convincingly, and at one point would predict a Hattori neutral sig, knocking her straight out of the air. Blue would be facing Cake in the grand finals, and Cake would finally find his footing and the grand finals reset with the matches 2-2 on a comfort switch pick of a Suri. The game was tense all the way to the final stock, where multiple hits would come through, barely not knocking out one another, but eventually Blue would snipe Cake for the Autumn Championship. Blue would not only carry his success with numerous singles championships, but would also team with Simple to win numerous doubles championships during his reign. During the Winters Championship of that year, they would defeat Blaze and Acno by not dropping a single match. Blue consistently doing the most damage every game. After the Winters Championship, Blue would win 2 more community tournaments, then would face Acno again in the grand finals of the Spring Championship. Even though Acno was ahead, Blue was on a completely different level mechanically. His confirms and quick combos were clean, and he didn't even look pressured. On top of all this, he had just decided to pick up a Suri, arguably one of the best legends in the game at the time, as Katars was super prevalent in the meta. Blue would go on to defeat Acno in the grand finals, winning 6 games to Acno's 1. No one came close to Blue's throne at this time, but things would soon head downhill. After 7 gold medals in a row, it seemed like no one in Europe could stop him, except there was one guy who might be able to. Traveling from overseas, Sandstorm would step foot in Sweden for the DreamHack Open of 2019. While both players were in their prime, Sandstorm not only defeated Blue, but would make it look easy. He would look up at the ceiling, rub his face in his hands, and pick Nyx just to signify that he didn't need Mordex for this one. 1 month later, Sandstorm would also 3-stock 3-0 Blue at CEO. I think it was these 2 lands that were the nail in the coffin for Blue. But hope wasn't completely lost for the Brawlhalla World Championship that year. But as you could guess, Blue was a top Europe pro with lots of victory headed into BCX, so he would place no other than 17th to 24th once again. However, just how Addy Mestic would take 2nd place when Mini lost, Simple would bring home 2nd place for his region. Not only something to be incredibly proud of, but it would net him $7,500. This would make a great and easy transition of the story, Simple being the next top pro after Blue. Similar to Addy taking over for Mini, but what would happen next will probably never be seen again. Our Winter Seasonal Championship would return, but this time, Acno would not only win Winters, but he would win 6 straight tournaments in a row, and with his teammate Blaze would win 17 2v2 tournaments without losing for the next 2.5 years. Acno by himself won the Brawlhalla Winter, Spring, and Summer Seasonal Championships of 2020, won Combo Breaker, Low Tier City, Steel Series, and the Mammoth Cup. And if after all of that, why do I still mention that Godly was the most dominant in Europe Pro history? Well, let's take a look at Acno first. To begin, he was a combination of all of those that were successful before him. Kind of like a Brawlhalla avatar. He was an innovator like Dobrain, who wasn't afraid to reach out and use different weapons such as blasters, but he also had a solid unarmed game like Addy Mestic, and from time to time would jump up, gravity cancel, much like Blue would to approach his opponent. Also, something special about Acno is that he could never really pick a main character, but he could literally play any legend, and would switch legend picks over and over until one would work. And his first big victory over Simple, he bounced legends back and forth until finally Nash of all characters would work for him. Any meta and any weapon, Acno could play it. If for some odd reason your favorite legend had a good combo that was being used to win, he could pick up that legend, hop straight into tournament, and win. For Low Tier City of 2020, Acno would pick up Sidra, a character synonymous with the Ninja 729, and then use his own legend to defeat him. And all the while, he and his teammate Blaze were tearing it up in 2v2s. Blaze plays Brynn, which is a large factor to their success since both of Brynn's weapons combo very easily in the 2v2 environment, with long hit stun animations and easy follow-ups. Acno would quickly move throughout the year, non-stop taking first place. This will be the first time an EU Pro would prove himself to be the best of that year and forever place himself at the top by winning the Brawlhalla World Championship to prove it. Except, no one could prepare for what would happen next. There would be a legend released a few months before the World Championship named Jae-yoon. Acno would even see success in this character, winning the Mammoth Cup of 2020. And at this point, Jae-yoon was in a tier of his own. With his signature weapon of the Greatsword, it had the range and damage of a heavy weapon, but the quickness of a string attack weapon. And yet, despite all of this, Acno went in with a different game plan for BCX. He wanted to use Bow, his one comfort weapon, and stick to its long-range engagements, I'm guessing to assist against the Greatsword range. Acno, who had even knocked out Blue, would make a great run into the top 4, but this wouldn't work for long. Simple had the advantage to defeat Acno and move on to Grand Finals. Acno would place 3rd for that year in BCX. And unfortunately, Simple once again would meet his fate at 2nd place. There's a third factor I'm not mentioning towards this story. A figure becoming very well known in the scene for his incredible plays, positive enthusiasm, and long streaming hours had all the momentum he needed to win the World Championship. Pavelski had quickly become a community figure. Everyone wanted him to win, and despite him not always being the best at the game, that day he certainly was. This wouldn't be all bad though, as Acno and Blaze would continue their streak, winning the 2v2 World Championship, which is separate from singles, so he did get a BCX trophy that year. But still, no top player of Europe had a winning season and won the BCX trophy for that year. Only losing to Pavelski, the BCX champion, Acno would go on to win the Winter, Summer, and Autumn Seasonal Championships, then again win 2v2 for the Brawlhalla World Championship. Acno had another shot at 1v1s for BCX, and once again, someone seemingly random out of nowhere named Swada would take the 2021 BCX trophy after not winning any listed tournaments I could find for that year. And Simple would also, for the third time, place second at the World Finals. I wouldn't lose hope just yet. During this time, there was someone in the background putting in amazing effort, and after 2 years of waiting, Godly was finally let back into tournaments again. The Godly reign would now begin. Are you serious? Did I voice crack there? Seemingly out of nowhere, Godly would come out of a mandatory break to sprint up the bracket in the Winter Seasonal Championship. Although it seemed like Godly had just appeared, he was accidentally spotted on a Brawlhalla dev stream, when they would point out nobody in EU had a better win rate than Acno, other than one guy named Marshmellow. That account had a positive win rate versus all other pro players on the ranked ladder, and that would be because it was Godly's account, the one he used during his hiatus. Godly and Acno would meet each other in winners finals of the Winter Seasonal Championship. The matches remained incredibly close, but Godly had a really good read on ledge situations and applied pressure knowing exactly what he could get away with in game. But that wasn't it. Acno would not give up on this throne that he had built for himself. He would win his way through losers to climb back onto the grand final stage. And in classic Acno fashion, he would begin to switch characters, starting this game on Koji, then switching to Petra, then Sentinel. Then in a similar situation to that of Blue and Cake, Acno would switch to Asuri to try and stop the bleeding. Godly, despite losing most of the last match, would turn the game around to signify the beginning of a new era. Godly, just like Acno before him and those before Acno, would not stop there. He has now go on to win Winters, Spring, and Summer Seasonal Championships, the Steel Series Championship, and Omen Oasis. Something interesting is that he isn't winning the 2v2 tournaments like Acno and Blue did, yet is still recognized as the most dominant EU pro. So why is this? This is largely due to the overseas interpretation of Godly and greater media coverage. Not only is Luna the best player in North America, but he's constantly being compared to Godly. But North America didn't pay much respect to Acno. If someone is winning so much in 1v1 and 2v2s, something feels off. Godly avoided this situation, because not only is he talented in-game, he's talented outside of the game, and very vocal. People know his story, and he makes his way onto the NA servers without fear of losing. He would even join a tournament with the top NA pro just to go on and win it. Acno has largely more success, but not the reach that Godly has on this game's players. The confidence, connections, and even his name, Godly, just make him iconic. So, will he repeat the same dark fate of that of the other top Europe pros? Or will he finally take home a Brawlhalla World Championship title for his region and have a winning season to go along with it? If he does this, two things will happen. No one can deny he's the best player in the world, and he would be recognized as not only the best player in the world, but the best player in Europe to have a winning season along with the BCX trophy. This story started with a competition between Dobrain and Daiku. After countless rivalries, driven players who helped the community grow, and an undeniable talent, it may finally be time for EU to break this curse and change their own fate. A lot of people are counting on Godly to bring it home for Europe, and he could be the first to do it. This year's BCX will take place in Atlanta, Georgia, in person for a $500,000 tournament prize pool. And I'll be there to probably lose 2 matches, then watch the rest, but I'll be extremely excited to watch Godly play. Many of these top pro players still contribute to the game today. Dobrain runs the Brawlhalla esports channel. Daiku keeps a watchful eye over the community and acts as a database for a lot of the old Brawlhalla information. Acno and Blaze still play the game, despite no longer being on their incredibly long winning streak, and Godly is of course still the #1 PR player in all of Europe. And if you're excited to watch Brawlhalla, or just want to know more about the history behind the game, please consider subscribing to my channel. I aim to provide exclusive content on Brawlhalla you won't find anywhere else, and I want to thank you for making it all the way to the end of the video. I have a Discord where you can go even further into discussion over these topics, or just say hi, and of course I look forward to seeing all of you next time. There's a few disclaimers I have to go over. Also, so this video would not be possible without the tremendous help of a few people. You may even recognize some of these names. There's Zyder, Blaze, Acno, Godly, Emperor Mini, Polymento, BoxBH, and Costlix, and probably a few others all came together, whether it was Twitter DMs, Discord DMs, explaining me how the countries work, how the competitors work, everything. You know, I'm from North America, trying to understand this entire Europe culture from just the outsider perspective, and I really wish I could have been here for a lot more of this, or at least been more involved, and they did a great job at putting me in the shoes of the competitors at their time. I mean, Zyder, Blaze, especially just Polymento, everyone mentioned helped so much. And then there's one final disclaimer I also want to add. If you are a pro player, or even just a PR player, and I may have missed an important detail about you or a part of the community, please let me know through either my Twitter or adding my Discord. Thank you.